So you have n squared minus 12n plus 11. Okay. So I don't know how much of that you picked up on, but do you know what step one is?
Well, there isn't a number in front of me.
Right, so we can bypass that.
Then it would be the
Not yet. So you're one step early. What we want to do is clear a landing pad right here. So we move the 11. So we're left with n squared minus 12n, leave a space, equals what?
negative 11.
Nice. This is where the take half squared algorithm kicks in, because now we're ready to do something called completing the square. And completing the square is the process of making it so that when you factor this down, it factors into something squared. Okay, so that's where it gets its name. And so, yeah, do the algorithm. Half of negative 12 is negative 6. And when you square negative 6, you get
36.
So we're going to complete the square by adding 36. And if you add 36 on the left, you have to add it on the right. Got it?
Yep.
So that's where the completion of the square is. We're past that now. And now it's time to do factoring. And the thing about this, what's interesting about completing the square is that you could take someone who actually has never factored before in their life, and they're still going to know that the answer is n minus 6 squared, which is interesting because like you kind of wonder like, how could you do that if you don't know how to factor? But the thing is that when you take half of negative 12, you remember how we got negative 6, you just know that number is going to go right there. Make sense?
Yeah.
So the factoring is easy peasy, kind of does itself. And then you do have to not make any mistakes on the basic math on the right. What's negative 11 plus 36?
25.
For sure. If anyone's interested,
Our class back to her room, please. Thank you.
if anyone's interested who was gone Thursday, or even if you were here, this is number 1 on the worksheet, which again, I know a lot of you are done with, but this one has a different flavor of ending. So you might want to come along for the ride. Because they don't all end like that last one that we did. So this one has a special twist. So I'm going to keep talking to Anderson, but you're welcome to come along. So do you remember the next step?
Be down square root the
Right.
crossing.
Yep. And so when I square root the left-hand side, I just get n minus 6. And then right here is the moment in time when you insert this sign. It's called a positive negative sign. Okay. It'll become a plus or minus in a moment when we put something in front of it. But when you don't have anything, it's just called a positive negative. Right. And what happens when you square root 25? You do. We don't need a root this time. We just get a number. And so this is when you know that you're dealing with what we call rational solutions, because rational is the most common explanation for what is rational. The technical definition of a rational number is any number that can be expressed as a over b, blah, 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 blah. What I've learned when working with teenagers is this. If you want a kid to know what rational means, just basically say this. It doesn't have any roots in it. It's a terribly inaccurate definition, but for our purposes, if the roots go away, it's rational. Does that work? Okay. So the next step in the algorithm is to take this 6 and move it. You got to move it right there. That's important that it go right where the arrow's pointing. I mean, actually, that's a lie. You could put it wherever you want, but conventionally we put it there. It just makes the flow feel better. So our answer currently sits like this. N equals what?
Equals positive 6 plus or minus 5.
Way to change that positive negative to a plus or minus. Expertly done. And now there are 2 answers, and we have to express them individually because the rule in math is to go until you can't go. So if you take the top road, what's 6 plus 5? So one of your answers is 11. And if you take the bottom road, what's 6 minus 5? So there's your 2 answers. And that's where those come from. So whenever you're doing the completing the square and that number on the right turns out to be 4, 9, 16, 36, 49, 121, whatever, then you know you're going rational.
Yeah.
Got it?
Yep.
Okay.
For the most part.
Let's do number 2 as well. And I'm going to let you help me do a little bit more of the work this time, but let's give it a shot. So we have x squared minus 2x.
Minus 43.
I didn't know if you were going to move that or not. So good. All right. So now what? By the way, There will be none of them on this worksheet where we divide. These all are going to already have a leading coefficient of 1. So you won't have to worry about the dividing thing until you get to the delta math assignment. Okay. All right. So what do we do? I
So
agree.
it'd be x squared minus 2x blank equals positive 43.
Nice.
And then half of -2 is -1. Squared is positive 1.
Nice job. So we're going to complete the square like this and like this.
Should be just x squared minus 2x plus 1 equals 44, or x minus
X
1
minus
squared.
Nice job. Good job. So you pretty much carried us to here. Great job. Fundamentals were good, solid. No issues there at all. So now it's time to cash this in. You completed a square. Now it's time to cash it in. What do we do next?
We root the whole
Absolutely. So what's the left side going to say?
is x minus 1
Mhm.
equals 2 root 11.
You committed the ultimate sin.
No, positive negative 2 root.
There you go. And for me to call it the ultimate sin is a bit overly dramatic, but the point is, remember, that is the instant where the positive negative sign has to come into existence. And nice job with your root, by the way. Root 44 to root 11. And then there's one more step. What is it?
Move the 1 over, which is x is equal to 1 plus 2 root 11, and x is equal to negative 2 root 11.
Just for the record, while I appreciate the sentiment, you're a great young man. You listen well. You don't need to separate them because they're irrational like this. When they're irrational, math people are weird, but conventionally, we're happy to leave irrational answers with a plus or minus. It's the rational ones that we want to divvy and see with our own eyes. So anytime there's a root left, you just leave it bound up.
Cool.
Like
Can you
that.
tell me if I've been wrong so far?
Sure.
First time. only
Will you read it to
message.
me?
Or I hate the
So like you guys.
So I need to know. So this isn't the original problem, right? Okay, could you tell me, just want to make sure what the original problem was?
4x squared
Okay,
plus 2 equals 64.
okay. And listen, not to be an untrusting person, but you'd be surprised how often our issues come from something that happened before the question started. So your work looks good so far.
Well, I know what I did. I was doing a plus 64 instead of negative.
Just those 2 things. That's a scary thing.
Okay, so you forgot the negative on the 236.
I think I would.
Okay, so do you still want to continue?
50-60.
That's right.
Okay, well, I'll leave it here and I'll pause this. And then if you decide you want to work together, then I'll work with you. So what'd you start with?
2a.
Yep.
16.
Yep. Minus 40. Okay, so I'm going to divide everything by 2, which is going to give me x squared minus 8x. And then it would say minus 20, but I'm going to go ahead and move that to the other side like this. Did you find your boo-boo already? What'd you do?
No, 5.
Interesting. Oh, you're good. What you got? Read it to me right off the screen, would you?
4x squared minus
Equals what? 240. Okay, so honestly, this problem is pretty well behaved because everyone is already where they're supposed to be. Usually we have to move things around, but everyone's right where we need them. We're just going to divide everything by 4. So we're going to wind up with x squared minus 4x awkward void equals 60. Are you with me so far? And then we're going to follow the algorithm. We're going to take half of -4, which is -2. We're going to square that, and then we're going to add 4 to complete the square. Did you already spot your boo-boo?
Yeah.
What'd you do? You did what?
We forgot.
Oh yeah, the void is what you need. It's like a little landing zone kind of for the number that completes the square. Delta Math calls it, I think, the magic number. So do you want me to continue on with you? Okay, so if we factor this left side down, what do we get? So here's a fancy fun fact for you. And I was just telling this to Andy or someone a little while ago that you could really take someone who has never factored before in their life and they could do this. Because even though what we're doing is called factoring, do you remember when we took half of -4? What did we get? That number just goes right here. Okay. It's not the best way to teach it to somebody, but just rest assured that if you factored x squared minus 4x plus 4, it would come out to x minus 2 times x minus 2. That's the power and the beauty of the number plus 4 is that by completing the square, you make sure it can be factored like that. And then on the right side, we're going to put equals 64. And you can already tell, maybe you can't, but I'm going to ask, can you tell? And if so, why? That these are going to be rational solutions. Exactly. It's a square. Good. So when we square root the left-hand side, that's this side over here. We just get x minus 2. And then what do we put on the right-hand side? Thank you. Don't forget your positive negative on the 8. There you go. And then what's the next step? Yep. So it'll say x equals positive 2. And listen, I bet most of the time this is where you're done. But because 8 is a rational number, then the expectation is that we'll go further. So the one answer comes from the top pathway. What do we get? And then the other answer comes from the bottom pathway. What do we get? And that's it. All right. No problem. Anyone else have any questions?